Hi everyone, we're back with another battle report, this time Empire versus Warriors of Chaos, playing a scenario that is in the upcoming tournament that I'm playing on Saturday week. So the tournament you might have remembered has towers in the first scenario, but the second scenario and the third scenario include a lot of standards. And this third scenario is particularly has a particular emphasis with standards that can distort the way the game is played. And that's apparent in the result of this one. So I'm interested to see what you think. A lot of people talk about objectives as maybe the best way forward for comp in Warhammer in terms of trying to sort of balance the playing field between armies a little bit better. I think it's probably true. However, there are trade-offs that you're making when you're playing this way, and the way that this battle played out probably shows how that those trade-offs and whether you want to make them. So you need, if you get a standard bearer partially or wholly within your opponent's deployment zone, you get a battle point. And then on top of that, if you have more standard bearers than your opponent at the end of the game, you get another three battle points. So battle points are worth essentially, well, these are the way the tournament is constructed. They're sort of worth 250 in-game points or kill points in the game. So for every 250 points more than you get from your opponent, you're probably up one battle point on them. So that's quite a lot. Gaining four battle points is 1,000 kill points, which is half of your opponent's army. These are 2,000 point armies. So I'll explain as we go along. I don't have my opponent's list, and I've played this army, or this army's been showcased on this channel before. So I'm just going to sort of explain as I go along. But you'll be able to see that deployment on the left flank, I've got Chaos Chosen Knights, a war banner in there, a warp fight, so they're in drilled here at the front, a warp fire dragon behind them, two units of Marauder cavalry, so with standards, flails, or full command and flails, these are my scoring units. I have five Forsaken, three Dragon Ogres, 10 warriors with great weapons, shields, and extra full command. The Demon Prince, Biting Blade, Armor of Meteoric Iron, Spell Familiar, and Ruby Ring. Flying as well, Mark of Undivided. Then underneath that, I'm using Demonology. So on the top, Michael has 10 crossbowmen. He has a unit of about 10 White Wolf Knights, and they have a Witch Hunter with the Pearl Daggers in there and a Chapter Master. Underneath that, or maybe just a champion, but he's got a captain or something that delivers a bit more damage in there. Then he had a unit of veteran state troops. These guys had the Griffin banner and spears or pole arms or something that allows them to fight in extra ranks. There was a level 4 wizard here on the corner that had illusion magic and a BSB inside as well. A unit of 7 outriders in the middle. And then on the right flank, I've got some vanguarding warhounds, another 5 Forsaken of Slanesh, a Shartak with the black and plate, and Michael has a Hellblaster, two cannons, an engineer in there, and a war wagon. So that's sort of what it looks like. We're trialing the software that helps you create battle reports, and it might, in a 2D format, show you a little bit more visually how things are working. I've essentially stacked the left flank, and on the right flank, Michael has his war machine. So that creates an interesting dynamic. I think overall, I was really passive in this game, and I don't know whether you can play an army like that. This was the first time I'd played the army, and getting a handle on all of the geometry of the movement and where the risks and rewards should be are something that you have to accept or get used to in the game. So that's what it looked like to start. Michael went first. What ends up happening is those, this is just a mistake, but it's interesting to think about because people have different points of view on Warhounds. So I just vanguarded them up, and then that put them in range of the Hellblaster straight away. So I believe that Outriders took one Warhound off the table, but then the Hellblasters killed the rest of them. So really, like in some ways you could say that's a wasted unit, but did I prevent something else from being shot at? And that's sort of, I think in this case, no, because the range is 24 inches and it was just a mistake and it should have left them back. But it is something to think about whether that 35 point unit it can survive or how you should play them in a sacrificial way. You've seen them on this channel in a few different reports, and I think I've done a lot better with them before. But in this case, it was sort of uh, useless having them just die straight away. But anyway, we move on. So what was interesting in this, so Mike puts his knights straight up. They're coming at the dragon ogres, and I had a chance. So they ended up that I could charge them on a 6, so they must have been 13 inches away. I was able to cast demonic vigor for +1 movement, so now I'm going to be getting them on a 5 because the dragon ogres have movement 8. The chances of rolling a 5 are in the positive, I think 55% on a charge roll. So you have to ask yourself, these are really interesting dynamics in the games. I think as you become more skillful, there are certain sort of sore points of luck. And we've been talking a lot about this, like sitting in forests or difficult terrain and having to take the low dice on a charge is a really big deal because anything can happen on those charges. And in this case, it's similar. Should I go for it or not? Even though it's 55%, failing a charge is really brutal because you only move the charge roll. So you're sort of stuck in many ways, and then you're going to take the hit anyway. This is a defensive unit. I think you just go for it, and I did and failed it. So they moved 1 inch forward and got stuck. But as we'll see, that's not the role of this unit anyway. But I think you should take your chances because that's something I didn't do in the rest of the game. And I think in hindsight, I probably could have been more aggressive, especially with an army like Warriors of Chaos. On the left flank, I've marked there in marching columns. Those knights have surged forward into pole position to try to attack the crossbowmen. The dragon has moved forward and then wheeled, so 18 and then sort of a 2 inch wheel to get a greater view of everybody else. And then these marauders are being shepherded into the back line because we're going to try to get them into the deployment zone to get this battle point. So that was an interesting thing to think about, and I've done a video on this about a couple of weeks ago on shepherding and how to get that through as people play more objectives. So a top-down view looks more like this. Say my marauders in the bottom left are going to be preserving that standard, and we'll see what Michael can bring through. I You see a top-down view of what I'm trying to do on the left side with the faster hammer type units, and then I've just put my Forsaken up as potentially bait, even though they're immune to psych. That would direct. You might be able to see pretty clearly that I've established an overrun lane where the knights wouldn't be able to hit the dragon ogres if they had to pursue or overrun straight forward. Those dragon ogres have taken damage from cannons from Michael, so there's already 2 wounds on the unit. Uh, and then underneath, I've pushed the warriors up right behind them, and the demon prince has moved out from behind the house to support them. So this is the key combat, one of the key combats in the game that'll come up soon. On the right flank, I've just repositioned to get away from being shot at and hiding behind this hill with my units. And Michael has brought his war wagon around to try to take down the Chartak and the Forsaken on that wing. This is something where, when I talk about I could have been more aggressive, I think I needed to try to put more pressure on those war machines. He's five. He's got 5 archers in the front who aren't going to do much. I would have taken losses, but the whole game sort of comes down to the threat that they project. So again, from the top, you can see some of the wounds. These little markers, wounds were taken by the Forsaken, the Dragon Ogres, the Warhounds were killed. You can see me shifting around this left side, snaking to try to get out of range of some of these war machines, but also to sort of come in from the left and hit the flank and deliver the Marauder cavalry and to the opponent's deployment zone. All right, so what happens is those white wolves get in and smash the dragon ogres. So a fun element. The Witch Hunter with its pearl daggers gets a number of cracks at killing blow, and he did land one killing blow, killing a dragon ogre outright, and then did about, I think, so another four-ish wounds. So two of them were dead, and I think they were fleeing. But the point was that with leadership 9 nearby, there was no risk of it running off the board. And I've made this video about the fallback in good order trap that you've set up here. So to explain in more detail, because there were some interesting comments about whether this is worthwhile. Firstly, I might be investing 500 points, which was wrong. It was about 350 points here of a unit, and Michael's unit is probably worth that much. But people might think, oh, if you send a 500 point unit into a 500 point unit, I think it's just a crapshoot. That's the point of those units. They're relatively equal. The point of the game is to find unequal combats. And we've had talked about this on the channel before, but something's got to die. So in this case, you want your units to just survive because then the opponent doesn't score the points for them. So if you lose sort of 75% of the unit, you'll start to lose some points. We're playing 50% wounds for 50% points, which is great in this format, but it's not 100%. And it's really about wiping out units still, breaking them and pursuing and following up. And that's not as easy as it used to be in older versions of Warhammer, but it's still the crux of how you score the most points in the game. So his knights charge forward, they win combat easily, and they're going to pursue. What they end up doing is pursue into the warriors, and that's going to allow my demon prince to be able to charge. And I spent some time thinking about this because the demon prince can be pretty vulnerable with unstable, but I'd rolled quite well already with favor of the gods, and it picked up an extra attack. And I had the assailment, demonic familiars, and I was able to cast the +1 demonic vessel as well. So with those spells, typically I love demonology with spell familiar. Pretty much anything except Vortex of Chaos I'm going to take and default to the summoning from that, and they're all useful in this build up because the Demon Prince has to play that sort of flexible middle ground and is able to come and be use magic missiles to start the game, fly around, provide leadership, crucially in this incident. So an extra leadership 9 for the Dragon Ogre and a potential 10 if you roll the right number in favor of the gods. And then on top of that, I should have mentioned at the start, I do aggressively use favors. I had 3 of them, so I can re-roll anything that isn't going to be permanent to begin the game. So those Knights of the White Wolf get in. They hit the warriors. I'm able to then attack back with the Demon Prince. What ends up happening on the left is I would have loved to have charged those crossbowmen, but Michael had been able to get up a column of crystal, and that meant that my charge range was extremely limited. So I was still able to declare a charge because I can see the unit, but it's now a lot longer. I'm maximizing on the right-hand side and I fail that charge to start with. So what happens is I get closer, the Forsaken are going to come closer. The dragon sort of just swings right in to try to limit the line of sight of some of these war machines, but it's going to try to charge whatever it can next turn. And this, we'll see, is from the fleeing unit that I win with in this combat. So what happens here is that Demon Prince with its super high initiative is in a flank attack or at the front, but it's able to hit the front row. It doesn't really matter. I'm able to cast. I kill, I think 6 guys. So I had 6 attacks, but Demonic Familiars is quite good against toughness 3. I think I roll pretty well for that. And I think I kill 3 from Demonic Familiars and 3 from the hits as well. And at that point, then Michael's not going to be able to hit very hard back. I think I lose a couple of warriors, but I win combat by a lot. I had been able to rally that Dragon Ogre to start with. So when you talk about this for fallback in good order trap, if they had lost combat, then they would have skipped through and the knights would have kept going. And the point people have made is, oh, well, then the demon comes in and saves the day. It's like, yep, that's what they do. This is Michael's hammer unit. If you can get your hammer unit to win an unequal combat against their hammer unit, that's pretty much going to be the game many of the times. And then on top of that, your anvils just need to take space. That's the role. So we'll talk about chaff, anvils, hammers, and the different units. And some armies have better versions of those than others. But ultimately, warriors, I think, are one of the armies with the best anvils in the game. And we've talked recently a lot about Chaos Warriors being really good. Dragon Ogres are probably the best anvil unit in the game because they can soak up wounds. They're a threat enough to hit back, and that means that you can run a playstyle where they take up space and you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't when you charge them. In this case, I think it was a pretty good result for the White Wolves on the first combat, but what happens is that I'm able to create a set point where the demon can get in and do the job. And so that's his unit gets routed right there. And I've got a lot of points on the table to begin with. And the warriors and the demons then are able to, or they're pursuing this standard bearer who's left, but he's not really going to rally. He needs double ones to survive. So that's where we end up to begin with. In the next turn, the dragon is able to get in. It's taken about 3 wounds from War Machines, and then I'm trying to move forward with my other units to circle around. I was really impressed with Michael's Outriders. Here, I think pistols may be one of the most underrated things in the game. When you have them in units, you can add combat res with stand and shoot. On top of that, I think just strength 4 with an AP modifier, while their range is short, it can rack up a lot of damage. It's sort of in that same capacity as magic missiles. When you're able to put them on a unit with a higher ballistic skill, like Outriders, and you're starting to hit on 4s more regularly than, say, 5s or 6s, or you have multiple shots and are getting up, say, 20 shots on 5s, I think they become really good. So I was very impressed with them in this game. They were able to ping off a lot of troops and get some damage done. So the state of play at this point is I'm able to get those knights in on the side and the Forsaken, and they're going to end up killing these crossbowmen. That was very clever from Michael. Again, like where I had created this bog, this anvil situation, and a fallback and good order trap. Those crossbowmen worth what 80 points were able to slow down the knights for maybe 3 turns. The Column of Crystal was obviously a big deal. On top of that, the knights had to burn their first charge on the crossbowmen, which will matter a lot when we talk about this block that has the Griffin standard in it later on. Beyond that, the War Wagon was finally able to get in against the Shartak, and they start sort of trading off in a very whiffy combat. And the first couple of rounds, they do a couple of wounds to each other each. And the Shartak is losing because it doesn't have close order, but hanging on and holding in those combats. The dragon had taken about 3 wounds when it went in. I didn't get to roll very well on the stomps when I got in because I'd been able to maximize against the mage on the wing and I couldn't. I whiffed on the attacks, couldn't get the stomps through, and I think the mage survives on 1 wound. After that, Michael's guys are actually fighting in ranks, able to wound the dragon twice, and it end up on 1 wound. So he wins combat by a lot and or enough and pushes my dragon back on a give ground. That's going to be consequential though. So as this moves on, I've started to move the Demon Prince out of range of these cannons, and I think that's something I probably should have risked a bit more. I had with the Armor of Meteoric Iron, you've got a 4+, 5+5+ save. I think it's about a 5% chance of being one-shotted by a cannon with its D3+1 wounds. I saw it happen on a tournament the week after. It made me feel a bit better, but it also made me think maybe that's the once in a blue moon that'll happen. Because if that Demon Prince could have got out here and maybe drilled the Outriders with the Summoning and Ruby Ring, it might have allowed me to get to those War Machines by the end of the game. So yeah, there's some pictures of that combat. There's the types of combats I love. The fun. Oh, can I roll 3+ to hit and wound multi-wound targets? It was going back and forth, but ultimately the War Wagon wins and then breaks the Shartak and pursues and ends up off the board in the pursuit. In the On the left side, you can start to see that depiction of how these combats had ended up. The knights win quite easily and have pushed where they can forward, but that dragon is about to get pushed back. And what happens next is the dragon then just gets dropped. So it gets pushed back, and you can see that space here as a large target. It opened up more angles for a lot of the war machines and the outriders to shoot. And I rolled incredibly well with the regen and full plate armor, but on the last batch, Michael was able to get through that last wound, and the dragon was killed for 375 points. I think the Warpfire Dragon is, especially when you're not playing double dragon, is a very fair piece. I think ward saved up dragon or combined profile dragons are really one of the peak things that are ruining competitive Warhammer to some extent, like with 360 charge arcs on Pegasuses and undead raising and sorcery. I think that these are three features that would help the most if they fixed. But when you're running the Warpfire by itself, especially with 50% points for 50% wounds, I think it's quite a fair piece. You're still going to whiff sometimes. You don't have the consolidated the saves from them or extra wounds from the rider on top. I think that's about where I'd put it as a fair thing. And they do look great. I don't think it's a particularly well painted dragon from me. I tried to keep it in theme with this army, but you do want these monsters in the game, and it's better than being blasted. I think the tension between the cannons and the Warfire Dragon was about where Warhammer should be in this game. So yeah, to update, the dragon gets popped, and then I'm lining up to try to get my charges onto the this big block, which will probably decide the game. And then the Chaos Warriors try to charge you Outriders. They have to flee, they fire and flee, and that's going to leave me open to the shots from the or when they rally, and then on top of that, from the War Machines is probably going to do those Chaos Warriors in. The War Wagon is sitting on going to come back on the edge. In the game, I did sort of shuffle the Dragon Ogre a bit in case it tried to go this way because that's sort of preserving points at this stage here and not get because a cannon could take it right off with their insane range. You can see that I'm stacking this wing to score those battle points, which will be critical when we tally up the result. So yeah, one of the last big things that happen is those knights get in. The Forsaken get in on the sides, who are great on the charge, easy to get in with their swift stride. And this was a pretty good combat. The knights just didn't do enough, really. I ended up doing 8 wounds. I think my champion died in a challenge against the BSB. I can't remember, but otherwise, I got 8 wounds through, and Michael's combat resolution was 9 in the end. Or I had combat resolution 8. So I think a war banner standard close order. So I must have done 5 wounds. And that's really interesting. I'm a huge fan of the Griffin standard. Having to have burned that first charge like meant that I wasn't able to get in and delete those ranks, which would have meant that I would have beaten the unit pretty well. But both these units have stubborn, and instead of risking a flee on -1 leadership, I decide to just pop the stubborn, as people say, and let them fall back in good order to try to charge again uh, if in a turn's time. From there, you can see the War Wagon comes back on. I send the Forsaken in because it's wounded, and that was an interesting combat. Went right down to the wire. They both actually died on the same turn in the second phase. I think we're at initiative, both at initiative 3 or 4. I can't remember, but we were striking at the same time, and I did enough to kill the War Wagon, and the War Wagon did enough to kill the rest of the Forsaken. I think it went about 2 rounds of combat. You can see on the left, after taking that damage. I was going last, and I had the option of sort of sending my troops back in, but I thought, I think I've got this on the board. If I send them back in, they'll probably, if they break without stubborn again, then they're fleeing at the end of the game, and I lose more points. The Demon Prince had come around, blocked here from the War Machines to try to start sending some fireballs through or magic missiles, but also trying to get into combat if needed. So that's sort of where the wrap up ended. The Forsaken and the War Wagon were destroyed. The Chaos Warriors had been shot. I had preserved my standards on the left, and the combat here they was repelled. And ultimately, the game comes down to these units hiding. So I've been able to get my knights into my opponent's deployment zone. I think these marauders were there too. I had maintained 3 standards to Michael's 2. his BSB and his Griffin standard. And so that meant I got the 3 battle points for the standards. I got one for his deployment zone. So I got a 2 battle point advantage. Michael scored more points than me. If I think he ended up between 250 and 500 points. Dropping the dragon was a big deal. Half of the dragon ogres, etc. Took out all the Forsaken units, the Shartak. I think I might have only really blown up the crossbowman and that unit of knights and 50% for his wizard. So it was a really interesting game that was won on the scenario points. I think that I'd played tentatively and I should have put more units, like maybe the extra unit of Forsaken on the right-hand side and gone straight at those cannons and Hellblasters. That would have taken some of the pressure off my dragon as well. And all the finagling with the knights was really interesting. I think chosen knights have this reputation, a sort of middling reputation. They've got a lot of potential. Other people don't really like them for how expensive they are, but they're very flexible and they give your army a lot of flexibility as well for what seems like a brute force sort of force I think just having a unit that can sort of get where it needs to go and then hit like a truck is worth, I suppose. Well, it doesn't always hit like a truck. That's the interesting thing, but threaten to hit like a truck is a big deal. So yeah, it was very interesting, the finesse of having to sort of shepherd those troops and win the objective, but that meant I sort of played more passively. And when you are playing objectives, you are sort of handicapped with the units that you use to gain those objectives. So people sort of bring them in as a way to make, say, crappy infantry more relevant. But I don't know if you can do that. Like most people just sort of play Warhammer with the best units they can grab. And then the tension in playing with the disadvantage is very interesting. I think it's better than straight rules as written power Warhammer at the moment, but there's probably still a way to go in terms of shaping out what sort of objectives create that tension that lead to a good game. I think standard bearers, not so sure. Your faster standard bearers are still great. But some of the other dimensions, like special features, are really good and contestable for most armies. So, yep, there you go. Hoping you're liking the format. We're going to try to refine the use of the Herald software to give these battle reports a bit more detail and a bit more strategy. So let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time.